What if I told you the biggest battle in your life isn't out there? It's in your head? What if the only thing standing between the life you dream about and the life you're settling for is the moment you choose to stop being lazy? Today's message is not for the faint-hearted. It's for the person who's tired of excuses, tired of waiting, tired of watching their potential slip away. If that's you, get ready, because this is the moment you flip the switch. Step 1. Pain of staying the same versus pain of change. There comes a moment in every person's life when the reality of staying the same becomes more painful than the discomfort of change. At first, the idea of transformation feels intimidating. Stepping into the unknown, breaking old patterns, facing fears you've ignored for years. Change demands effort, uncertainty, discipline, and emotional investment. And because of that, most people avoid it. They convince themselves that their current habits are not that bad, that there's still time, or that things will somehow improve on their own. But deep down, there's a quiet tension building, a pressure you feel every time you look at the goals you haven't touched, the dreams collecting dust, and the version of yourself you know you're capable of becoming but haven't committed to yet. And that inner pressure is the pain of staying the same. The pain of staying the same grows slowly, quietly, almost invisibly at first. It's the frustration you feel when you repeat the same unproductive day for the 100th time. It's the disappointment in yourself when you break another promise you made to change. It's the heaviness in your chest when you realize you're living far below your potential. Most people ignore that pain because it doesn't explode all at once. It drips, one day at a time, one excuse at a time, one delayed decision at a time. But that drip adds up until suddenly the weight becomes unbearable. You wake up and realize the life you're living does not reflect the strength, talent, or purpose within you. And by then, the pain of staying the same has grown far larger than the temporary discomfort of change ever could. The pain of change, on the other hand, is sharp but short-lived. It's the burn you feel when you push yourself into new habits, the discomfort of breaking cycles you've been stuck in for years, the resistance your mind puts up when you try to replace old patterns with stronger ones. Your brain will fight you because change threatens the familiarity it depends on. Even when the familiar is destroying your confidence or limiting your growth, it still feels safe because it's predictable. That's why taking the first steps toward change feels like a battle. But unlike the pain of staying the same, which grows heavier the longer you avoid action, the pain of change gets lighter with every step you take. Every new habit you enforce, every small win you create, every promise you keep to yourself reduces that discomfort and replaces it with pride, momentum, and identity shift. The turning point is when you begin to understand that discomfort is not the enemy, stagnation is. When you recognize that growth always carries a price, but so does remaining stuck. And the price of remaining stuck is much more expensive. It costs your confidence, your potential, your self-respect, and ultimately your future. The pain of change is temporary. The pain of staying the same is permanent. And every day you delay, the silent, invisible cost increases until you reach a point where something inside you finally says enough. Step 3, emotional state, certain productivity. Your emotional state is the foundation of everything you do, and it directly determines the level of productivity you create in your life. Most people imagine productivity as a matter of schedules, tools, planners, or discipline, but the truth is far deeper. You don't take action based on what you know you should do. You take action based on how you feel in the moment. If your emotional state is drained, uncertain, overwhelmed, stressed, or unfocused, your productivity collapses no matter how detailed your plans are. But when your emotional state is strong, energized, purposeful, confident, and centered, you naturally act with clarity, intensity, and commitment. This is why two people with the same knowledge and same 24 hours can produce wildly different results. The difference isn't intellect, it's state. Your emotional state functions like the engine of a vehicle. If it's low on fuel or flooded with noise, the vehicle doesn't move well no matter how perfectly designed it is. When you wake up with low energy, negative thoughts, or a sense of discouragement, even the smallest tasks feel exhausting. You procrastinate, overthink, hesitate, and lose momentum. Your brain becomes wired for avoidance instead of achievement. People blame laziness, but in reality, most lazy behavior is simply the byproduct of a drained or mismanaged emotional state. You're not unwilling, You're emotionally unaligned. Without the right internal state, the body cannot produce the actions needed for progress. This is why so many people feel stuck, even when they know exactly what they need to do. They are emotionally out of sync with the version of themselves that could produce results. On the other hand, think about the moments when you felt powerful. Those times when you were excited, motivated, and mentally sharp. Tasks that once seemed overwhelming suddenly felt doable. You moved faster, made decisions more confidently, took more risks, and pushed through challenges with a completely different level of resilience. That shift didn't come from new information. It came from a new emotional state. When your emotions rise, your standards rise. When your standards rise, your productivity follows. Your emotional state creates the lens through which you see your day, and that lens determines whether you act or avoid, grow or retreat, move forward or fall behind. This is why learning to master your state is essential. The way you breathe, the way you move, the way you stand, the way you speak to yourself, these things dictate the energy your brain operates from. People underestimate how much physiology controls psychology. A slouched posture, shallow breathing, and negative self-talk generate a low-energy state that destroys productivity before you even start. But when you change your physiology, stand tall, breathe deeply, activate your body, you instantly change your emotional chemistry, and once that chemistry shifts, everything else follows. Your focus sharpens, your courage increases, your drive returns, productivity becomes a natural expression of the emotion you're embodying rather than a chore you're forcing yourself to do. The truth is, your emotional state determines your destiny long before any plan, strategy, or goal ever does. When you master your state, you master your output. When you master your output, you master your results. And when you master your results, you reshape your entire life. Step 3, identity shift. An identity shift is one of the most powerful forces in human transformation because people don't act according to their goals. They act according to who they believe they are. Your identity is the internal blueprint that shapes your choices, behaviors, and habits. If you see yourself as someone who always quits, you will quit even when you want to keep going. If you see yourself as someone who tries, you will try but never fully commit. If you see yourself as someone who is inconsistent, you will constantly fall back into the patterns that match that story. Identity acts like an internal thermostat that always pulls you back to a familiar level of behavior, no matter how hard you push. This is why so many people set goals, get motivated for a short period, and then fall back into old routines. Their identity never shifted, so their actions couldn't stay elevated. A true identity shift happens when you stop trying to change your behavior from the outside and instead change the belief you hold about who you are from the inside. It's the difference between saying, "I want to be disciplined," and "I am a disciplined person." Those words may seem small, but the meaning behind them is massive. When you adopt a new identity, your actions begin to align with it automatically. You no longer push yourself with force. You pull yourself forward with alignment. It becomes natural to do what used to feel impossible because your mind now sees those actions as consistent with who you are. Identity determines what you tolerate, what you avoid, what you chase, and what you sacrifice. When your identity evolves, everything else evolves with it. Identity shifts often begin in moments of frustration or awakening. Those times when you look at your life and realize that the person you've been is no longer acceptable for the future you want. There is a breaking point where you decide, consciously or unconsciously, that the old version of you can't go where the new version of you is trying to go. This internal decision becomes the trigger for transformation. You begin to let go of the habits, excuses, and emotional patterns that belong to the past identity. You start upgrading your environment, your routines, your conversations, and even the thoughts you allow in your mind. Bit by bit, you sculpt a new self-image, and the world responds to that shift. One of the largest misconceptions about identity is that it is fixed. In reality, identity is fluid. It is shaped by your repeated actions, your emotional intensity, and the meaning you assign to to your experiences. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you become. When you consistently make small choices that align with your desired identity, those choices accumulate and create an unshakable foundation. Over time, your brain begins to see those behaviors not as effort, but as evidence. Evidence of strength, evidence of discipline, evidence of confidence, evidence that you are no longer the person you once were. An identity shift is not about pretending or forcing yourself to be someone new. It is about revealing the version of you that has always existed beneath the layers of fear, doubt, sabotage, and conditioning. Once you shift your identity, you stop chasing change and start embodying it. Your results no longer depend on motivation. They come from who you are becoming, not what you are trying to achieve. Step 4, replace comfort with purpose. Comfort is one of the most seductive traps in human life. It feels warm, familiar, easy, and safe, which is exactly why so many people get stuck in it for years without even realizing what it's costing them. Comfort convinces you that you don't need to push harder today, that you can delay your dream until tomorrow, that settling for good enough is acceptable. It whispers excuses that feel logical, even though they quietly rob you of your power. Comfort doesn't show up as a dramatic decision, it shows up as small daily choices. Hitting the snooze button, avoiding difficult conversations, choosing distraction over discipline, taking the easy path instead of the meaningful one. And each time you choose comfort, you reinforce a version of yourself that avoids growth, avoids challenge, and avoids stepping into your real potential. Comfort may feel enjoyable in the moment, but long-term, it becomes a cage made of softness, a prison where your ambition slowly suffocates. Purpose, on the other hand, is demanding. It stretches you. It pulls you into territories you've never experienced. It requires sacrifice, effort, and emotional resilience. But purpose also fills you with a sense of meaning that comfort can never provide. When you're connected to a purpose, you wake up differently. You move differently. You think differently. You stop asking, what do I feel like doing? And start asking, what needs to be done? Purpose overrides temptation. Purpose makes discipline easier. Purpose turns obstacles into fuel rather than barriers. Where comfort offers a temporary escape, purpose offers long-term fulfillment, something deeper, something lasting, something that gives your life direction. The challenge is that purpose doesn't feel comfortable at first. It disrupts routines. It challenges your limits. It exposes your weaknesses. It forces you to confront parts of yourself you've been avoiding. That's why so many people choose comfort, not because they lack dreams, but because purpose requires them to grow beyond the identity they've built their entire life around. But growth never comes from ease. Growth comes from stepping into situations that test you, challenge you, refine you. Purpose forces you into a level of demand that awakens strength you didn't know you had. What once felt impossible begins to feel necessary because purpose gives you a reason to endure. Replacing comfort with purpose is not about eliminating rest or removing joy from your life. It's about shifting your internal compass so that your decisions are driven by meaning, not convenience. It's choosing actions aligned with your future, not emotions aligned with your past. When comfort becomes your priority, you shrink. When purpose becomes your priority, you expand. Every purposeful action, no matter how small, chips away at the comfort-based identity that keeps you limited. You begin to feel alive again because purpose ignites a fire that comfort could never spark. At some point, you must decide which force will shape your life. Comfort will keep you where you are, but purpose will take you to who you were meant to become. Step 5, micro wins create momentum. Momentum is one of the most powerful forces in personal growth, yet most people underestimate where it truly comes from. They believe progress requires massive breakthroughs, dramatic transformation, or monumental actions, but that's not how momentum is built. Real momentum is born from small wins, micro wins, that accumulate over time. These tiny victories may seem insignificant in the moment, but they shape your identity, your confidence, and your belief in your ability to change. When you complete a small task you promised yourself, whether it's waking up on time, drinking water, finishing a 5-minute workout, or simply organizing your space, you send a message to your brain. I follow through. I can trust myself. That internal trust is the fuel that creates momentum. Micro wins build the internal architecture needed to support bigger wins, and without them, you're trying to run before you've learned to walk. Most people fail not because they lack ambition, but because they attempt to leap from 0 to 10 in one dramatic jump. They set enormous goals and expect instant transformation, and when they can't maintain that level of effort, they crash emotionally and feel like failures. But the problem isn't their capability. The problem is their strategy. Micro wins shift the focus from dramatic, unsustainable action to consistent, achievable action. They lower the barrier to entry and remove the emotional resistance that often paralyzes people. When you start with small, meaningful tasks, your brain experiences fast, frequent rewards. These rewards release dopamine, reinforcing the behavior and making it easier to repeat the next day. Slowly, the brain begins to crave progress instead of comfort, which is how momentum becomes self-sustaining instead of forced. Another powerful aspect of micro wins is that they transform your identity without overwhelming your nervous system. Every small win becomes evidence that you are no longer the person who quits, procrastinates, or avoids responsibility. You begin to see yourself as someone who finishes what they start, someone who moves forward even on difficult days, someone who is capable of building discipline one choice at a time. This identity shift is subtle but profound, and it only happens because micro wins create repeated proof of your evolution. Big goals can inspire you, but micro wins transform you. They build the internal momentum required to handle bigger challenges with confidence and stability. Micro wins also interrupt the cycle of perfectionism that keeps so many people stuck. Perfection demands big results, flawless execution, or dramatic effort, but micro wins celebrate progress instead of perfection. They allow you to move forward even when motivation is low, when life is chaotic, or when circumstances are far from ideal. You don't need the perfect environment. You just need one small action, and the moment you take that action, everything shifts. Your energy rises, your clarity improves, and your sense of control returns. You move from stagnation to motion, and once you are in motion, staying in motion becomes much easier. Momentum is never built in giant leaps. It's accumulated through consistent, intentional micro wins that compound into unstoppable forward movement. Step 6. Raise your standards. Raising your standards is one of the most transformative decisions you can ever make, because your standards dictate the quality of your life far more than your goals or desires ever will. Most people think they're held back by lack of talent, lack of opportunity, or lack of resources, but in reality, they're held back by what they are willing to accept from themselves. Your standards create the invisible threshold that defines what you tolerate, what you chase, and what you demand from your own behavior. If you have low standards, you will always find ways to justify small effort, inconsistent habits, and excuses. But when you raise your standards, those same behaviors become unacceptable. You refuse to repeat the patterns that kept you stuck. You stop negotiating with your potential. You begin to expect more from yourself, and that expectation becomes the catalyst for change. The moment you raise your standards, your entire life begins to shift because you start operating from a different internal rulebook. Instead of asking, "Can I get away with this?" you start asking, "Is this aligned with the future I'm building?" That single shift in mindset changes how you show up, how you work, how you think, and how you respond to challenges. People with high standards don't wait for perfect circumstances. They create momentum despite obstacles. They don't need external motivation because their internal rules demand action. They don't settle for mediocrity because mediocrity violates the identity they hold for themselves. Raising your standards isn't about becoming harsh or unrealistic. It's about refusing to allow the weaker, limited version of you to run the show. One of the reasons standards are so powerful is because they redefine your identity. When you raise what you expect from yourself, your brain must adapt. You begin to see yourself differently, and that shift influences every decision you make. If your standard is to be disciplined, you act with discipline even when it's uncomfortable. If your standard is to be consistent, you follow through even when emotions fluctuate. If your standard is excellence, you stop giving minimal effort and start striving for growth in everything you do. Your standards become your internal compass, guiding your decisions without needing willpower every day. This is why some people rise quickly in life. They aren't necessarily smarter or luckier, they simply refuse to operate below a certain level. Their standards eliminate the behaviors that sabotage most people's progress. Low standards, on the other hand, create a life full of disappointment, frustration, and regret. When you tolerate excuses, you stop taking responsibility. When you tolerate inconsistency, you lose momentum. When you tolerate negative self-talk, you destroy your confidence from within. And the worst part is, most people never realize that their suffering isn't caused by fate. It's caused by the standards they've accepted. They keep wishing for a better life while living in a way that contradicts the life they want. Nothing changes until the standard changes. Once you raise the level of what you demand from yourself, the world around you responds. You attract different opportunities, different people, and different outcomes because your internal baseline has upgraded. Raising your standards is the point where transformation becomes non-negotiable. It's the moment you decide that the old patterns are no longer allowed and that the future version of you deserves stronger, higher, more powerful expectations from the person you are today. Your life changes the moment you decide you're done settling. This is your time to rise, to push, to demand more from yourself than ever before. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. Create it. Step forward with strength because your future is built by the actions you take starting now.